Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Headliner Nation, what is going on? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and we are going to talk a little bit about the current offseason consensus rankings. So what I want to do in these videos is really just kind of to discuss, as of right now, pre-2022 NFL draft, where do some of the guys stand in the consensus rankings? What could possibly change for them? And what do I not like about that ranking as of right now? So we're going to discuss that a lot more and all these guys. And we're not going to go through like the entire consensus rankings or anything like that. I've just picked a few that I have some interest in that I think that maybe they could just end up being a little bit different. So we're going to go through all that right now to discuss it. And I just got to put this on there as well so everyone remembers it is April. These things are going to change. All right. So we have no idea where we're going to be in a couple of months when people actually start drafting for fantasy football. But I do know that as of right now, I'm hoping that some of these things change. So let's go ahead. We're going to hop right into it. Don't forget that we are giving away an autographed jersey. Pin comment down below. You're going to find out how to win that. So the first couple of guys that I want to talk about going to be Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. Now, the red arrow and the green arrow means that I would move them up and down depending on how many spots, and we'll talk about as we go through. I just think that Dalvin Cook should go up, Christian McCaffrey should go down. And let me tell you why, all right? The biggest thing that has deterred people from drafting Dalvin Cook as of recently is his injury profile, right? There seems to be this issue with Dalvin Cook that every year he's going to miss a couple of games. Well, if that's your big reason for not wanting to draft Dalvin Cook, then what is your reason for wanting to draft Christian McCaffrey over him, who has only played in 10 games the last 2 years? That's where things kind of come into play here. That's my questioning of why are we ranking Christian McCaffrey above Dalvin Cook, knowing that the real reason that we have Dalvin Cook as low as we do is because he's going to miss games every single year. Well, Christian McCaffrey hasn't played in more than 10 games the last 2 years combined, and we are still going to rank him over Dalvin Cook? Seems to me like there might be a little bit of a flaw in that thought process, because obviously, Dalvin Cook had the ACL injury like his rookie year. Then he missed some time in 2018, his second year in the league. And then he's played in 14, 14, and 13 games. And for a running back, missing 2 to 4 games, yeah, it's not great. But that's the only reason that we're not drafting Dalvin Cook as high as we would like to. I mean, I think you could really make an argument that if I were to tell you that you're going to get a healthy Dalvin Cook for 16 or 17 games this year, you're, for the most part, going to draft him number 1 or 2 overall, right either before or behind Jonathan Taylor. Probably right behind Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the last 3 years, he has 1,000 yards each of the last 3 years. Touchdowns, 13 and 16 the 2 previous years before dropping to only 6 last year. And the receiving game, we know that he makes a little bit of an impact there in the receiving game, 53, 44, and 34. So compared to Christian McCaffrey, obviously his 116 receptions and 1,000 receiving yards 2 years ago that blows that out of the water. But we know Dalvin Cook is going to make a little bit of an impact in both areas. And still, we're going to look at it and say, well, we're going to rank Christian McCaffrey ahead of him, even though Christian McCaffrey has had injury issues the last 2 years. I mean, if you're saying, but yeah, if we get a full, healthy 17-game slate out of Christian McCaffrey, of course we would take him over Dalvin Cook. That's great, but then you're going to basically have to say, well, Dalvin Cook is going to be healthy too. Like, if you're going to argue that, oh, if they're fully healthy, well, I mean, yeah, that's great. If they're fully healthy, Christian McCaffrey's going a spot above him, but you don't know that. So if your argument has always been skipping on Cook because he's been injury-ridden, then why in the world are we drafting Christian McCaffrey ahead of him? The next two that I teased about in a YouTube short a couple of weeks ago, Najee Harris and Joe Mixon. This one I don't understand for the life of me. And it's not because I don't like Najee Harris. And it's not because I'm hating on Najee Harris. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. The reason for my confusion here is that Joe Mixon, for the most part, was better across the board last year than what Najee Harris was. Better across the board than what Najee Harris was. Now, there are some areas where Najee Harris did do a whole lot better. But Najee Harris got 300 touches on the ground, right? Joe Mixon got 292. Not really that big of a difference there, right? Najee Harris had 1,200 rushing yards. Joe Mixon had 1,205. So, close. Najee Harris had 7 rushing touchdowns. Joe Mixon had 13. Receiving-wise, yeah, Najee Harris had 94 targets and 74 receptions. That's great. Joe Mixon caught 42 of his 48. 314 yards to 467. So there wasn't even a big difference there. Now, if you play in half PPR, Najee Harris probably gets, a little bit of the leg up there with that receiving yard work. But Joe Mixon doubled his touchdowns last year almost. So, yeah, that's a pretty big deal in points-wise. So that basically offsets each other. Also, now that we're going to talk about the team around them, Joe Mixon's offensive line is substantially better than it was last year. And it's not even close. Substantially better. It is by far better than Pittsburgh's offensive line. And Pittsburgh's offensive line, they've made some changes. Joe Mixon's offensive line is substantially better. Oh, by the way, Joe Mixon also plays with Joe Burrow as his quarterback. Najee Harris is going to have Mitchie Biscuits. Okay. If there's anybody out there that says they want Mitchell Trubisky over Joe Burrow, I'm going to need you to shut the computer off and just walk away. Okay. Think about the mistake that you just made. No one's saying that. However, you got to have a really good QB to keep the pressure off. And not only does Joe Mixon have a really good QB to help keep the pressure off, but he's got a really good set of wide receivers around him with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd that can beat you literally all over the field at any point in time. Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson are pretty decent players, but they are nowhere near that trio. And again, it's not even close. So yeah, Cincinnati by far is a better team and a better offensive team than what the Steelers are. Do you really think Najee Harris is going to get all of those touches and targets again this year? It's possible. It's going to be close. But do you think that he's going to be able to keep up with Joe Mixon in terms of efficiency? I would like to bet no. Najee Harris last year only averaged 3.9 yards per carry. Joe Mixon was right at 4.1. But again, Cincinnati's offensive line was not that good last year. Joe Mixon's best in terms of averaging yards per rush, 4.9 back in 2018. I would not be surprised if we get closer to that 5 mark with Joe Mixon this year. The upside for Joe Mixon, even though you want to argue with me that Najee Harris gets a ton of volume, the upside with Joe Mixon is substantially better than Najee Harris because of his big playability and the guys around him to take the attention off of him. Najee Harris is going to be the focal point of the Pittsburgh offense this year. Mitchell Trubisky is, unless he has some sort of a giant recreation of himself and comes back as an all-pro quarterback, that offense isn't going to touch what Cincinnati can do. And that makes Joe Mixon a much better buy at a higher price tag than what Najee Harris would be. A couple of guys that I think are just too high right now. Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers. Antonio Gibson, for me, just has not been given the reins, and I don't know if he's going to be given the reins because it looks like the Washington, I keep wanting to say Washington football team. It looks like they're sniffing around some running backs in the draft to add somebody there to help Antonio Gibson. Now, Antonio Gibson did take a step forward last year in terms of his overall yards and work volume and things like that. But really, he actually kind of took a step back for me because Yes, his rushing attempts and his yards went up, but his touchdowns went down. He had 11 touchdowns on 170 rushes his rookie year. He only had 7 on 258 last year. His yards per attempt went from 4.7 to 4.0 last year. His targets did get a little bit of a bump in targets, a little bit of a bump in receptions, but kind of stayed really even. 7 yards per reception compared to 6.9. Now, he did add 3 touchdowns receiving last year. That's great. But is he going to be the guy? If Washington drafts another running back, the likely answer is no. He will be the starter. He will be the main person. He is not going to get the type of volume to justify me taking him all the way up at the ECR running back 13. I'm not going to do that. That's way too high for me right there. I just can't. And with Cam Akers came back last season at the end of the year. For him to come back like that is just an absolute crazy scenario. I don't think any of us thought that was going to happen after hurting himself and tearing that Achilles in game 1. He comes back and he actually ends up making it in the playoffs. I mean, that's crazy on its own. So big time props to Cam Akers for doing that. But I don't care. A lot of the argument around Cam Akers right now is, oh, he came back and he was given the workload right away. I get that. He was given the workload right away. He wasn't that good with the workload, though. So, at this point, if you're betting on Cam Akers making the jump and getting back to his pre-Achilles injury, you really don't have anything to go off of from that. Meaning, if you take a look at what he did after coming back, yes, there was volume, but he wasn't that explosive. So if he would have been more explosive, then it would have been like, yeah, he played great. We already saw the explosive. He's going to be even better. You didn't see that, though, in those games. He averaged 3.24 yards per attempt against Arizona, then 2 against Tampa Bay, then 3.69 against San Francisco, and then 1.62 against Cincinnati. So he averaged 2.57 yards per attempt in the playoffs last year. He didn't score a touchdown. Now, he did have 8 receptions, so they did use him in the passing game a little bit, which was good to see, but only under 172 yards on 67 carries. That's not enough for me. That's not enough for me to justify taking him at the running back 15 over a couple of other guys who are right below him, who honestly have a little bit better of a track record so far. And don't forget, Darrell Henderson is still there. I know y'all want to hate Darrell Henderson, but your boy was right last year. I told you to take a shot on him with Cam Akers. Okay? You took a shot on him. If you listened, you held him, and then you got a guy that really, for a good part of the season, helped you win some games. Darrell Henderson was good last year. Now, I'm not taking a dub there because Cam Akers got hurt. By no means. I was talking about his efficiency increasing last year, and if something were to happen to Cam Akers, that Darrell Henderson would be a guy that really could step in. And something did end up happening to Cam Akers, and Darrell Henderson did end up stepping in and helping. So to just give Cam Akers all that workload again, I don't think so. Darrell Henderson will be back, and he will be healthy. He was banged up really bad at the end of the year. He'll be back and healthy. He'll be used in the running game. But a couple of guys that I'll take over Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers, David Montgomery and Ezekiel Elliott. The fall for Ezekiel Elliott, oh man. But we will get to that in just a second because we are going to talk about David Montgomery here for a second first. David Montgomery, 13 games last season. Now, this was a team that was all over the place. This was a team that was not in a good spot last year with coaching, with play calling, with really everything. It all started on the sideline, and it transitioned into poor seasons for everybody. Now, 3.8 yards per attempt from David Montgomery, and only 7 touchdowns last year. But we did see, over the last couple of years, David Montgomery start to get into a better workload. A better workload in the passing game. And now Tariq Cohen is gone. Khalil Herbert is still there. Khalil Herbert is a really solid second running back. He's not going to be a guy that takes all the touches from David Montgomery. He's going to help. David Montgomery should still be the main pass catching back. And guess what? There's no more Allen Robinson. They really haven't done a whole lot to add to that offense. So David Montgomery could definitely get back to those 54 receptions on 68 yards that we saw in 2020 and see those yards go up a little bit as well from 438. Now, if we take an even bigger step back to 2020 and we think that Justin Fields is a little bit better this year, play calling's better, the offense as a whole is just better than it was last year, he could get back to 1,000 yards like we saw on 4.3 yards per attempt a couple of years ago. So David Montgomery over Antonio Gibson or Cam Akers is a little bit of a safer bet for me right now because we know he's going to be the guy. All right. We know that he's going to get some work in the passing game. And we know that as Justin Fields continues to develop, they are going to use David Montgomery in that capacity. Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, this is a guy that, just a couple of years ago was considered the #1 draft pick in fantasy football. If you weren't taking him number 1 overall, you were taking him maybe 2 or 3. You were taking him maybe 2 or 3 overall. And now he's down to running back 19. He still ran for 1,000 yards last season, people. He has not had a season where he has averaged under 4 yards per carry. He has only had 2 seasons in which he has ran for under 1,000 yards, and both of those seasons were shortened. He was suspended back in 2017, and then 2020, he only played in 15 games. If he plays in game number 16, he runs for over 1,000 yards. And he still helps in the passing game. Yes, Tony Pollard has come in and taken away some of those targets, but his targets, after the 95 targets that he had in 2018, over the last 3 years, he has still had 71, 71, and 65. All right? We can't walk away from the fact that Ezekiel Elliott is still going to be a big part of this game, a big part of this offense. They're still going to run the ball a lot. Mike McCarthy is still over on the sideline. All right? And he still scored 10 touchdowns last year, and that was with an injury. The dude was hurt almost all season long. Okay? He was hurt all season long. Dude even making it out there for 17 games and playing all 17 games. Oh, by the way, last year played in all 17 games, first time in his career. So we're going to take a look at Ezekiel Elliott and really say that this guy deserves running back 19 after everything that we've seen from him. And they got rid of Amari Cooper and they haven't really added another wide receiver as of yet. So Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott both will probably still get a decent amount of targets. They paid Ezekiel Elliott a crap load of money and they held on to him. They didn't try to drop him or they didn't try to get rid of him and get out from at least some of that money. They got rid of Amari Cooper instead. Jerry Jones wants Ezekiel Elliott as the RB1. He's going to be the RB1. He's going to have some frustrating weeks where you're going to watch Tony Pollard get some nice touches. But overall, at running back 19, how is Ezekiel Elliott not going to finish as at least a high-end RB2? That's my question. How is he not going to finish as at least a high-end RB2? That's where I start questioning some of these things. Because it's really, putting Ezekiel Elliott at running back 19, a lot of these, consensus rankings that we see over the offseason are driven by some of the things that we just saw towards the end of last year. He was the running back 6 last year, injured all year long, and having Tony Pollard take touches for him. Ezekiel Elliott at running back 19 is absolutely crazy, absolutely ridiculous. And if you get this guy like in round 2 this year, steal, baby. So let's lock in that steal right there. But hey, there's just a nice little breakdown of the ECR talking about the running backs first. Appreciate everybody tuning in to this video. Hit that like button for me down below. Don't forget our friends over at Pristine Auction doing a jersey giveaway. There's going to be a pinned comment down below that's going to tell you how to win that. Subscribe if you're new here and leave me a comment down below and let me know if there's anything in the consensus rankings that you saw here today that we talked about that is also concerning to you. I'm going to get out of here, though. All of you stay safe and healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on 3rd down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that Chubb life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this headliner nation.
I'm a headliner.